Good evening, and I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Kelly Carroll, and I chair Bennington's Community Policing Advisory Review Board, and I want to welcome and thank everybody who has come down here to the firehouse tonight to join us live for our first listening session. Before we get started, I just want to do a couple little housekeeping things. I just want to remind everybody that we will operate tonight very similar to what we do during public comment in our meetings. So I'm going to ask everyone to please be respectful, to limit your time, your comments to 3 minutes. If you want to come back up and comment a second time, we're just going to ask you to wait to make sure that we get through everybody and give anybody who does want to speak an opportunity first before you get a second round at it. And then I also want to remind everybody that this really is not a Q&A session. This is our first listening session, and I think it might be better to think of it as more of like a data collection for us as to what we're doing and the path that we're going to have forward over the next year of the board. We're also hoping to get some possible topics for some future CPARB meeting agendas or possible forums. So we do ask that you come up, and we're going to ask you to share your experiences, your input. We do have the ability for you to come up at the front of the room. We would ask that you would identify yourself if you're comfortable with that and your town. And if you're not comfortable being on camera, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we do have a secondary microphone over on the side, which is not on camera, and then we also have little stainless steel bowls with some pens and paper around the room if anybody wants to comment, and we will read those anonymously. You also have the ability to comment on our webpage on the comment form, so if I'm looking at my phone during the meeting, it's because I'm trying to monitor that to see if we have any comments that came in. We did get a couple of them through the public comment portion of our website, and I will read those later as we go through the evening. So I wanted to again thank you, and before we go any further, I just want to introduce Tom Haley. He's going to speak for a moment, and then we'll do a brief introduction from the board before I turn the evening over to Brian Corr, who is our facilitator. So again, thank you all, and Tom?
Hi. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm Tom Haley. I'm the Select Board Liaison to this board. And I just wanted to give you a little background about how we got here today. A couple of years ago, give or take, the Select Board, in response to an obvious need both nationally and here in town to take a look at policing practices, got together a task force that did a few things for us. They helped us update and organize our policies and procedures for the police department, and they also set the groundwork for formation of this board that you're going to be speaking to today. This board was first seated just about a year ago, and the bulk of this year has been spent in a lot of training and a lot of data collection and a lot of just getting their feet under them and figuring out exactly the best way to do what they need to do. So this event, as Kelly said, is their very first listening session, and the reason they're holding it is because the belief is that we cannot truly be a community group without hearing from the community and finding out the issues that are most important to the community so that they know exactly what they should be working on. So please speak honestly, speak from the heart, and even though you won't get responses today, your question or your comments and what you share will form what the work is of this board. So it's very, very important, and I thank you all for being here tonight.
So next I'd like to have the board introduce themselves, and I'm going to start over here with Will.
So I'm not going to talk too much just because of the smoke in the air, so I'm a little sensitive right now. My name's Will, and I'm a student at Bennington College. I joined the board like everyone else last year because we saw a need for it in the community and we wanted to serve in some capacity. And just in relation to me, and kind of why I felt that my presence on the board would be worthy is that I study public administration and local governance, so I felt like the research I do on criminal justice reform would really tie into that, and so far it's been great, so yeah.
Hi, my name's Jeff Vickers, and when this first came out and I saw that, I, like everybody, see the news stories and different conversations, and it, to me, seems like a lot of the problems in life are often communication related, and it seemed like this board was a good way to possibly help communications with different groups of people that might help that problem that we're all seeing. So that was why I was interested and thought about joining this, and I look forward to hear, because this is a big part of it, the communication part, so looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. So thank you.
My name is Mark Hudson-Knapp. When I was in junior high here, some of my classmates called me Swampy. You can laugh if you want. When I was in high school, I grew long hair. That's when I got some. And I would walk down the streets of Bennington and people would stare at me suspiciously. And when I came back here for retirement, I met Kyle Morris at my church, and I was touched by her openness, her warmth and wisdom. And when I heard later that she was being haunted by people who gave me home and threatened me, I felt terrible. And so I wrung my hands and felt helpless, and I did nothing to make her safe. I did my friend, and I want to do better. I'm here also because a BIPOC friend, whenever he walked in our streets, felt afraid. He never knew when someone would verbally assault him, calling him the N-word, and telling him he did not belong here. I am here because riding along with the Bennington Police Department officer showed me a very compassionate, patient, skilled officer who was regularly receiving abuse from each person he stopped. He responded with understanding, compassion, and information, not arguing to the people who were trying to get him into a dispute. I'm here because every single person deserves to be heard, to be safe, to be respected, valued, and cared for, because you are a gift. And I'm here tonight because I'm feeling very thankful to you, to each one of you who has come tonight. Some to listen, some perhaps to speak, to risk sharing your experiences, both helpful and upsetting, to share your appreciation or to share your ideas for us together. And I'm here because we are in life in Bennington together. And I believe as we open our hearts to everyone and are ready to admit our needs and our mistakes, to forgive and work and laugh and learn from each other, that we can be a true community for everybody to listen.
Wow. You do this to me every time. What could I possibly say?
We're going to put you in a different position.
After this. So anyway, hello, thank you for coming. My name's Robert Ebert. My wife and I moved here to Bennington just over 14 years ago. And one of the things that attracted us to this community was that the town had its own police department, its full-time, fully paid professional police department, which I think is a critical part of a town's infrastructure. And like any other part of the town's infrastructure, we've got to do what we can to make sure that it runs as efficiently as it can and as effectively as it can. And for the police department to be effective, there's got to be a strong relationship between the police department and the rest of the community. And I say that because the police department is not separate from the community. It's part of the community. It's a very vital part of the community. So the CPARB, when this came along after the recommendations made in the report by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, one of the recommendations was to put a board together like this. And in fact, I think the report came up with 25, 30 different recommendations on how to improve the police department's ability to do its job. And I'm hoping this board, over the years, will be able to review those recommendations and implement them, the ones that make sense to us. And so tonight, with our first listening session, because we simply can't do any of this in a vacuum. There are 6 of us here, we can't think up, everything that needs to be done. We have to hear from the members of the community. So hopefully this is just the first of what will be many listening sessions. So once again, thanks to everyone for coming out to this first one. Thank you.
And my name is Kelly Carroll, as I said before, and I am the chair of this board. And I'm here today because my daughter was murdered 2.5 years ago, and since then I have decided to become an advocate for my community and for several different types of people, including victims of violent crimes. I also happen to firmly believe that we need more mental health services within the Bennington County. And when CPARB came along, I saw this as an opportunity to help build trust within the community, because that is one of the things that we are charged with. And I think that one of the things that we can do to start that off is simply building that relationship between the Bennington Police Department and the community and enhancing what is already there. I do believe that I'm proud to be from Bennington. I've lived here since 1969. I'm still on the same street. I appreciate what the Bennington Police Department does. I do believe I work in healthcare, and everybody has somebody who kind of takes a look and sees, what's going on and what you're doing. And I think that, we have the opportunity to not only listen to the community and what's important to you, but also to help fill the educational, I don't want to say gap, but maybe build that bridge between some of the policies and procedures that the Bennington Police Department does and why they do it, and helping the community to understand, and also helping humanize the community to Bennington Police. And I'm not saying that they don't treat people like humans, because when I did my ride around, I was very impressed with the level of professionalism that I witnessed. So that's why I'm here. I'm hoping to make a difference and to get people talking. This is our first listening session. Thank you very much again for being with us. And I do want to now turn it over to Brian Corr.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. Oh, wow, that's super loud, isn't it? How's that? Okay. No, I can hear me, so.
And my apologies. I just wanted to take a moment to thank and acknowledge some of our key leadership within the town of Bennington, starting with our select board. We have our chair, Jeannie Jenkins. We also have Jeannie Connors, Ed Woods, Sarah Perrin here, and then we have Chief Doucette and Lieutenant Cam Grandy here, and Representative Mary Morrissey. So thank you very much for making the time to be here with us.
Okay. Great, thank you. So some of you know me, some of you have no idea who I am. I'm Brian Corr. I live and work in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But when the town was working to address some of the concerns in that report from the ICP around creating some sort of community policing advisory group, they reached out to the National Association of Civilian Oversight. And I'm a past president. I was asked to do this first on behalf of that organization, NACOL, and it's almost exactly 2 years ago here in this room. I did a presentation about what civilian review and civilian oversight could look like. And so I ended up doing work over the last couple of years with the town. I have been incredibly grateful to be able to get to know people here, to work to support your community as you continue this journey to make your public safety even more responsive to the needs of your community, address concerns, and work to make sure all voices are heard and acknowledged. So that's really my role here tonight. I'm just here to help all of you have a conversation, the members of CPARB to be able to have a chance to listen. And again, really the goal is to hear from you about your experience, your feelings, your thoughts about policing and public safety and community safety here in Bennington. Remembering that this board is around policing issues. There are a lot of things that are related related to those issues, and certainly I know the people who I've worked with over the last 2 years will be interested in hearing them, and the hope is that we can really hear about what your experiences are, what your hopes are for policing. And as Kelly said, the chief and lieutenant are here. I see them already listening actively. I know they've been very engaged in this work as, I don't want to say partners exactly, but really supporters, and helping the board to get its feet, helping the process to make sure that it is interacting well with the police department. And so just know that I've done work like this all around the United States, and you really have a set of leaders in your community who are working hard to do what they've been asked to do, to really make sure that policing is what people here need and want. So I won't go on and on about that. I do want to share a couple of I don't know, let's call them conversation norms or meeting agreements. I hate ground rules. So these are really just some suggestions, and if it seems like I might need to mention them again, I will, but here are the things that I'd like to offer. So our hope is that this is a space for people to speak and to be heard and to listen and to feel safe. It can be both a brave space where people might step out a bit and say something that's a little uncomfortable, but also we want it to be a safe space. We want people here to feel that it's okay to be here, that they're not being attacked or excluded in any way. And we want people to speak their truth, but in a way that works. Everybody is here ultimately for the same reason, right? To be part of this listening session and to support the kind of public safety and community safety you want. But people have very different lived experiences, different reasons for being here on a personal level. So just please listen with an open heart and an open mind. Listen for understanding rather than judgment or critique. And just recognize that some things that come up might be difficult for someone because of your own experiences. If you need to take a break, feel free to step out. The restrooms are just down the hall and to the left. No one knows why you're getting up. But if something comes up that you're just like, I need to take a break from this conversation, please do, and you won't be judged. The other things I just want to ask people to consider are thinking about, in a sense, what Kelly said. 3-minute limit is a good rule, but just approach it also as you want to share the space. If you're someone that has something in mind, but you don't always speak up, think about coming up and sharing your truth. If you're someone that loves to talk and you're always first to the mic, maybe, step back a little bit. Just be, again, respectful as you communicate with people and allow other people the space to share their ideas and thoughts. It's perfectly fine if you choose not to speak. There's no pressure to. And again, you might want to speak on camera. There's a mic over there if you don't want to speak on camera. And the last thing I would just ask is to just try to speak for yourself. I know very often people have experiences they've heard about, stories they've heard that you want to share, and that can be okay, but to the extent possible, speak about your experiences and what you know and what you've seen more than what you've heard or what you've read about. But those things can be shared, but just to think about sharing from your own experience. So that's really what I'd like to offer. I hope that's okay. And with that, I think we want to just open it up. We want to just hear from people. We're going to do this for about 40 minutes, and we'll have a break for pizza at 7 o'clock, so we can kind of, relax and have a little bit of food, and then we'll come back together. And at the end, there'll be some more conversation, because this is not just to hear things and take some notes, but the CPARB is going to be coming back with action items out of this as it does the rest of its work. So toward the end of the meeting, I'm not sure exactly what we'll have, but we'll try to kind of come back and make sure that we've gotten it right, that we've heard what people have said. So with that, this is that moment where we might have to sit here awkwardly till the first person comes up to speak. But I'm a Quaker. I can sit here in quiet for a long time. All right, please. And if you are willing to say your name and your town, and if you aren't from here, maybe like a word or two, your connection.
So many know me. My name is Jonathan Phipps. I am officially tomorrow, the former equity coordinator for the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union. I am actually not a resident of Bennington. I just work here. That's a joke, but it is true. I live in Troy. So the reason why I come to speak to this, I speak to this on a macro level. My job title is somebody whose job is literally to make sure that all within a school system feel included, safe, secure, and able to be their best selves, regardless of race, color, creed, race, religion, creed, color, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability status, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I start off with saying one thing that is very important, and I'm glad that some people did bring this up. In any effort that is like this, there's two things that I always think are reigning supreme in importance, and that is communication. Continual communication, and also empathy and understanding. Understanding that everybody's experience is different than your own. Understanding that, like me, as a black male in the United States, may have a little bit of a feeling towards, no offense, at least, than other people. So I'm just going to talk about my personal experience, and then I'm going to also talk about my, I guess, 2 cents of wisdom to give to this board, because I do actually have a firm, almost weird attraction to Bennington, even though I'm leaving, and I want to see this place thrive. So, I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland. For anybody who's seen a TV show in the past 20-odd years, you know what that entails with police. Doesn't take much imagination. I will say this, my first experience ever in my life to have a positive experience with a police officer was when I was 26 years old. The irony behind it was I was not even in my own country. I was living in Australia at the time for 4 years. That was the first time I had a positive experience with any police officer in my whole entire life. 26 years old. I'm not going to, I was a kid that was not a bad kid, not a good kid, just a kid. I was never one to like overtly start super trouble, but I was an activist and I was kind of a loudmouth. But to me, to have to wait 26 years to have a first positive experience with any police officer is endemic, and it's very representative of a lot of people from my background within this country. I'm going to make comparisons, though, to Baltimore City, and that's, again, out of my personal experience. So one of the things that makes me feel positive about Bennington in this effort is I'm comparing it to a lot of what I've had to deal with Baltimore City Police. In Baltimore City, there has been up until fairly recently, there has been pretty much every effort by a department, and then some, to shoot down an effort such as this, to make it as least transparent, least accountable, if not non-existent. Here, I can see it in its baby steps. Is it perfect? By all means, no. I think there's a lot of work to be done. Personally, I'm a big fan of having more actual authority vested into the community, into the civilian part to oversee the police. That's my personal preference. But and it's not there yet here, but it is a start. Maybe one day you'll get there. That's just one piece of sage advice for the future. I think you guys, whoever should be sitting here, should be having some degree of authority and ability to oversee the police and implement your will onto them based upon your recommendations. I think that's the first step. A lot of my youth and a lot of other black people's youths, where our views are shaped through a lens in which the police are, in fact, a dangerous entity. And you know what? I'm here to say that's actually 100% true. They are a dangerous entity. I don't think you have to be far imagined if you're a black person to think, yeah, the police can be dangerous. That being said, I'm not an absolutist. I do understand that there are departments behave differently depending upon the dedication, commitment, and resources they put in to an effort of understanding and empathy to the community in which they serve. A city like Baltimore City, where that dedication and commitment was next to zero, is going to have one outcome. A city like Bennington, where the dedication on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say, is a 6 or 7, is going to have another outcome. My parents live in a place called Howard County, Maryland, where they put 9 out of 10 effort into it, and they have a totally different outcome. What you get in is, or what you get out is what you put in. You reap what you sow. So with that, I'm also going to play a little thought experiment with the crowds, because I'm a very interactive person. I hope that's allowed, and I hope nobody minds. So everybody, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to look to your left. Make sure you look to your left. Everybody look to your right. What do you all notice? Let's say it. Somebody say it.
No white.
Thank you. Is this community monolithic? No. Outside of me and Mr. Kaur, no offense, unless I could be misjudging somebody, please, if I am, let me know. We are engaging in a monolithic discussion right now. That's not necessarily advantageous, because right now you have zero representation from Bennington from anybody of color or from the BIPOC or global majority community. Remember, I live in Troy. I just work here, or worked here. That is a serious shortcoming and flaw that needs to be addressed. I don't know how, because I'm not full of all the answers. If I was, I'd have a Nobel Peace Prize, and I'd probably be working in the UN someplace, making a lot more money than I am right now. But it is something that needs to be addressed. There are ways you can do this that I think you could try. It's not just people of color, there's also LGBTQ community organizations, or let me start. Reaching out to organizations, NAACP, Urban League, example, et cetera, et cetera. I understand that those relationships may be tumultuous at times, but still, always reaching out to them is a necessity. If you do not reach out to them, you will not get any representation. Even if you don't get an answer back, still, you have to do it. You have to actively engage with the communities in which you're not a part of to understand their experiences. I'm able to have a great conversation with Chief Doucette. The guy's funny, we make jokes at each other. I mean, it's a weird, if you knew me when I was 22 years old and you knew that Jonathan Phipps is going to be joking with a police officer, somebody would have been thinking, you probably should be, tested for something that's flowing through your veins or in your lungs or something like that. But the thing is, I'm able to do that. Why? Because I continually communicate. Because he reaches out to me, I reach out to him. We have a dynamic. It's not adversarial, it's Christian take. When he calls me, I make jokes that he's wiretapping my line. We just have that dynamic. The point is, we have to reach out to each other. This same board needs to do that. There are people who you should actively try and reach out to. I don't know how you can do that. I'm not in your shoes, I'm glad it's not my job, but you do need to. The reason why you have to do that is because, again, like I said, if you don't have those voices, whether they be people from the global majority or BIPOC, whether they be people from the LGBTQIA spectrum, whether they be people with just disabilities, autism. My wife is on the spectrum. Next to people of color, people who are autistic are next in line for the most fearing people of the police, and with good reason. My wife has been stopped when she was having a mild meltdown and then taken to jail despite showing, like literally taken in custody despite showing her like card saying, hey, I'm autistic, I'm pulled over to the side of the road to try and recollect myself so I don't, cause a problem. These sort of things are things that we need to look into. You need to have that representation here. If you do not, you are missing out from those experiences. But just having that representation is not enough, even if they are here. It's going to have to be a continual effort. It's going to have to be a transparent effort. It's going to have to be an inclusive effort. It's going to have to be a patient effort. People from different backgrounds may say things, as Mr. Kaur said, that you may be uncomfortable with. That doesn't mean they're any less true. If I were to tell you that my shoulder was smashed in by a Baltimore City police officer and I had a broken scapula, and it was totally unwarranted, it was unjustified by any means, I was not breaking any laws. And in fact, the city had to award me money for it. Guess what? That's not at all true. That's not untrue. All of that is true. They beat me up simply for being a community activist. That's not a lie. That is a feeling that a lot of communities have towards police departments. If you don't understand that, and you don't engage with that, and you don't put on all your effort to try and mitigate that, or at least address that feeling, efforts like this will fall flat. They will not be successful, they will be met with apprehension or suspicion, and you will be back at square one having the same discussions that you're having tonight, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, again, I say look to your left. Everybody do it, please. Look to your right. Everybody do that. We have to work to address that. This is a great effort, but if it's not inclusive, it may be for naught. And that's really all I'm going to say with that. And then I'll leave that to the board. Reach out to organizations. please do.
Are we allowed to ask a question? No.
It's just more of a listening, and we'll take it.
I'll answer a question.
Yeah,
I don't want to get into back and forth, Robert. It has.
No, I think Kelly's right. I think, and maybe I can just say something as someone who's not on the board, and this is not so much directed at Jonathan, but just so people know. In fact, that's why I started going through paper here, because I agree with so much of what you've just said without going into detail. And please just know that the board has been actively working on a lot of those things. And as you say, it takes a long time. So I know the board has been talking with the NAACP, with organizations in the community that work with people with of different identities and encourage people to come to this forum. And the board is aware that this is a first step. Like, not everyone wants to come to a forum where you go up to a mic and you speak your piece, that they're going to be working in many different ways to engage with as broad a section of the community as they can. So I'm not, so again, just this is more so people know that this isn't something the board hasn't done. It's a long road. As you said, if it were easy, this bunch of us would have Nobel Peace Prizes and we'd be, vacationing right now. So
That's true. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, there's glare, but I see someone raising their hand, so please.
I have a logistical question. It's very hard.
Actually, would you mind using the mic only because we're being broadcast?
I'm Michael Wida. I live here in Bennington. I'm having a hard time having someone facing toward you and hearing back there. He made a lot of effort to turn around so we could actually hear what he was saying. Is there a way that this could be positioned? I mean, like in a select board meeting, a person is over here, you have a much better chance of picking up what they're saying. He made a lot of effort, not everyone's going to, and we, who are also listening, will miss 70% of it. Thank you.
Okay. Jeff, can you sit at the podium? Can we just get a podium? Josh, is that going to mess you up?
Okay, so this is part of being flexible and working with the community. We're going to move that podium so people will still be able to be seen on CAT TV, and it won't feel like the way Michael described it. So.
Do you use the podium?
So I'm going to grab the other end, and I know I'm going to mess this up if I just drag it.
Just the mic.
I guess I'll maybe just, if two people come up together, they can.
My name is Zach, and I actually just had a question on a follow-up, Jonathan, and I don't know if we can interact with each other, but because I wondered you had painted a picture of having more people at the table from the BIPOC community, and I totally agree that that is important. I just wonder, because you had asked us to look to our left and our right, and when we look at, I did that, and then I counted the people in here, and I see a representation of about 8% of people who are BIPOC, and I could be wrong too, maybe someone identifies something else. 8% of the people in here, and that is similar to the people in Bennington who are of a BIPOC background. So I just wonder what your, if you can clarify just how you would.
This report's not a resident.
Yeah.
0%.
But you contribute to our community, you spend time here, you have the same not the same, but you have a possibility of interacting with the police. I just wonder if you could paint more of that picture for us of like what would be equal representation, any.
I get to go home, like, let's say me and the police department were mortal enemies. At the end of the day, guess what I get to do? Go home. Yeah, if they really wanted to, I guess they could drive across state lines and drive for an hour, and they could also probably get their buddies in Troy to, hook me up and stuff and invest with me, as has been done in the past. But still, I get to go home. People who live here, when they go home, they're still in their jurisdiction. There's a difference. I cannot speak for them. I can only speak from my experience and the knowledge that in my 3 years working here, I always got to go home.
Okay. All right, yeah. I appreciate that, yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So, yeah, and that was just a question, I just wanted to kind of also speak to my experience with the police too. I am a resident of Bennington, and I've had good encounters with the police. I think they're an important aspect of our community. We work with them along as a property manager in the community as well, and there seems to be an increase in crime. I think they do a good job at they do what they can, at least. They seem a little bit short-staffed and everything, so I think that just giving that feedback is important, and we're open to more collaboration, and I think that there could be some more lines of communication open, just to provide this feedback, which I think that events like this are important, and for people coming into our community like Jonathan coming and speaking to us, but also people that live here. So thank you for providing this opportunity.
All right, thank you. So I really do want to invite people to come forward and share their experience about the Bennington Police as well. I see someone here.
Sam Restino, Bennington, Vermont. I'll share an experience that I had a few hours ago, early this morning. I got up early this morning, and on my agenda was to go to People's Park. That was one of my many tasks of the day. And at first, I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't go because the park is temporarily closed. Or maybe I should go and to see for myself what's there from what was stated back on Tuesday, and here it is already Thursday. Upon entering the parking lot, I couldn't help notice that in each of the single trees that were placed, there were posters, and as I got closer, there were statements of individuals who wrote statements. I didn't know these people, who they were. There were no names signed. But I went to, as though they were grave markers, I don't want to put it that way, but they were markers, respectfully displayed. There were nobody else at People's Park. And I went to each one, read it once or twice, took a picture, and started to absorb the feeling of why a public park was closed and try to understand what people wrote. I was trying to get a feeling of that park. I was a little apprehensive of going further right into the park, but when I saw one individual that was there, I decided to strike up a conversation. Breaking of the ice. And we talked quite a bit of the discussions of what happened and issues of Bennington. And when I left, I had a better understanding of those individuals, of what their feelings were and their sentiments. But I was totally amazed at how well organized and respectful the ones who are at that park consider it their home, their domain, even though it's a public park. but it was respectfully placed. The posters that they made that Wednesday, from what I read in the banner this morning, not seeing for myself because I was out of town. And it was just a few individuals and myself and nobody else. And when I left, I got a sense of feeling of data, that a little learning experience. They learned a little bit about what my sentiments were, and I learned from them what their sentiments were. So, how can I say it? It's a touchy subject to speak about it, but we spoke about it. We spoke about it civilly. We had an understanding, a mutual understanding. So I just wanted to bring this to the, per se, table today, and because it affects us all. It affects all of us in the community, everyone in this room, to the ones that are watching on camera, and I'm glad we're speaking tonight.
So again, other people who are willing to, you've come here tonight, which is great, but would love to hear people talk about your experience of the Bennington Police Department, to talk about what you think the CPARB should know about BPD and policing in Bennington. It doesn't have to be negative, it can be positive. It can be whatever your experience is, but it really will help this group of people who've taken this commitment very seriously to hear from you. Even if you feel like it's nothing very important, we want to encourage you to speak.
Hi, I'm Leslie Addison. I live in North Bennington. And I came tonight because I have a close family member who's lived her entire life with a chronic and serious mental illness. And I know that there's good work happening with the Bennington Police Department and their collaboration with, for example, UCS's emergency services and a lot of other good people in the community. It continues to break my heart when I see something in the news where somebody with a mental illness is unwell, and in their community, there's a response that escalates the situation and leads to a bad outcome. So I really hope that your group will bring the voice of NAMI, which is the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, on this committee so that those voices can be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing so personally. So maybe someone can share why they came here tonight, if you feel like you don't have something to say about policing.
No, you guys want that shot.
Jean Connor, Bennington. That was good, Brian. Gave me a reason to come up. I came tonight because I have a very strong feeling that we're all responsible for our community. The board is responsible, the police department's responsible, the fire department, everyone has a role to play. And I would love it if the board, the CPARB board, if there was something that you needed from the community, information, help in any way, that you would feel comfortable coming to the community with a request or however you need to get the feedback, because I really feel we're all in this together, and if we want the best community we all need to work together. So I'm really interested in obviously us giving you guys information, but if you need us as a community, I hope you feel that you can ask the community for help if there's anything we can do.
I think one thing we will ask is when the town survey comes out for participation and feedback in that. So, thank you, Jean.
So I do see a hand, but I'm hoping that people who haven't had a chance to speak yet might come forward and speak.
I'd like to read some of the comments before we...
Oh, that's right. And Kelly has some comments that came in electronically for this meeting.
So we have a website on the town's website. We have a page on the town's website, and we have a comment area, and people are able to send comments to the board, and we did get 3 comments for this evening. So I want to read one of them now, and this one is from Bruce Lee Clark. So the issue is community policing. You have asked what community policing means to me. For me, there are 3 essential parts to my definition. The first is the process of creating partnerships, both formal and informal, with community partners. These partners may be formal organizations such as UCS or GBICS with formal memorandas of understanding. Also, partners may be informal groups of citizens or neighborhoods or constituent members of the Bennington community. This creation of partnerships results in several positive developments, including breaking down of silos and responsibility within the community and the Bennington Police Department, BPD. This also assists in the building of trust between various parts of the community and the BPD, which is essential for the development and advancement of public safety. In short, the BPD is not solely responsible for public safety in Bennington. A second part of community policing is the development of a problem-solving process that engages the BPD with its various community partners. Whether it involves identifying a problem or the process of developing possible solutions, either the partners or the BPD should be able to take the lead, but each needs to work together. The frontline officers of the BPD need to be able to take responsibility in this process. Examples of this are the several officers who engaged in both the policy development process recently undertaken, as well as the development of the CPARB itself. While involved at a managerial level, the senior leadership should be empowering line officers to take responsibility and engage in the problem-solving process. Additionally, community involvement will make it more likely to discover underlying situations that may be the cause of local problems, as well as possible solutions to the underlying situations or issues. Patrol officers and their observations are key in this process of engagement with the community partners. Thirdly, the organizational structure of the BPD needs to reflect this emphasis on the engagement of patrol officers in community policing. Everything I have read and experienced in over 30 years of engagement with this issue tells me that the patrol officer needs to understand how she or he are essential to the process of listening and engaging with community groups and are given the authority to take the lead in these relationships. Management should be engaged in the encouragement and empowerment training of patrol officers to work on the development of partnerships and utilization of these partnerships in identifying and resolving problems within the larger community. I encourage the CPARB to pursue its charge to assist the BPD in transforming itself into a model of community policing in both form and function. And that was submitted by Bruce Lee Clark through our website. So thank you, Bruce.
Making this mic turn on. Okay. No, thank you, Kelly. So I'm just going to keep throwing out different questions until people start to speak, because I'm a Quaker. I can do that. So I'm going to ask it this way. What issues does any of you see around policing that need to be addressed in Bennington? Because Okay, so, yeah.
No intention of speaking. My name is Peter Lawrence. I'm a resident of Bennington. I'm a retired attorney. I did not do criminal work except for the first few years of my practice. I have to say, I'm a little frustrated because you asked why people came here. I came here to get a sense of what you guys are all about and what you're doing. I came here because I expected it to be somewhat of a question and answer, which you said it's not. So I don't know what the purpose is of this, and I really don't have a good idea of what you're all about or what you're doing. Thanks.
So I'm going to ask for informal show of hands. Are there other people here who kind of like, yeah, that's sort of what I was hoping for as well? Okay, a couple. Okay. So maybe we can collect a couple more things and then we can perhaps try to address some of those things briefly. So what else about why you came here or what you think needs to be addressed around policing in Bennington? Okay. Okay, let's see. I think, is that Michael back there? And then, we have sort of the same people, so we'll come back to you. But.
I'm Michael Wida. I've been in Bennington about 4 years. I haven't had many exchanges with the police. One of the first things I remember was when the Black Lives Matter was being painted on the street, and there was some tension. There were people who were opposed to it being painted there, standing in the way. And there were people painting it who painted around their feet, which I thought was very creative. And the police, I felt, were helpful because I believe there were some threats of people with guns. Guns are a problem. And so the other experience I had with the police was not a direct experience, but there was a photo in the newspaper of the police holding a military-style weapon in a drug raid. The woman was cowered on the floor or in the yard. And it just seemed like an unfortunate way to portray the police. I realized that drug raids are dangerous, and that people who are involved in the selling of drugs can be dangerous and armed. But I just felt that the publicity around that was unfortunate for the police and for the community to see that kind of display of weaponry. What I'm interested in is how the police are working with things like Turning Point and the counseling center, and because to me community policing is trying to get others to solve some problems that really aren't police problems. I mean, I think the police are needed in situations where someone is being violent, threatening the safety of others physically. But sometimes getting underneath those problems is important. And so, I don't know. I haven't read a lot about that, so I don't know. I don't know how much the Police Oversight Board knows about that. But that would be interesting to me to know how much the police are engaged with other organizations in Bennington who are trying to solve. So it's the homeless situation, and all the stuff that's going on right now with People's Park, and there's no public facility restroom in Bennington. There was feces in the park. Well, yeah. I just don't know. I think there are underlying things that it'd be interesting to know how the police are, and the police are short-staffed. I hear this a lot. And I appreciate that the police are wanting to interchange with the community. So I don't have a lot of disdain at all. I have respect, and I have respect for this effort. So I'm trying to learn more. So that's one reason I'm here. Thank you for inviting us.
All right, thank you. Okay, so please. And I'll just say, I think people know, I'm trying to call on people who haven't spoken yet, so getting more voices is often good.
I'm Mary Ellen Munley, and I live here in Bennington. And I wanted to build on what we just heard in terms of what I see as an issue as a citizen here. And it's not an issue with the police, and it's not an issue with anybody in particular. It's an issue that we, by not doing anything differently, I think we're criminalizing too many things in our community. So we criminalize domestic abuse when it's the police who come to the home and are charged with taking care of the situation. We criminalize the difficulty that some children have in school because they start to act up and they get anxious and they're seen to be out of control. And we criminalize that by having the police be responders in those situations. And my way of thinking of the issue is that it's an issue that belongs to all of us. And the fact that we can be comfortable with saying, but that's an issue that everyone is facing in the whole of the country. Maybe it's an issue that everyone's facing in the whole of the world. That, to me, if we are satisfied with that as a community, that's a big issue. And so what I have to say is that I hope that there's a way that collectively we can in fact be really upset about this. Upset as we are when there's a solar station that's going to go someplace that is not appropriate for many of our citizens. As upset as we get when there is a speed limit that seems to be endangering some people in a community. I would like us to work together to be as upset about what's happening in terms of so many things being criminalized, and so little tolerance for people who are seen as marginalized or misbehaving in some way, without us doing a better job of understanding one another and really trying to care for one another and care for the health and the safety of everyone who lives here, not just some of us who live here. So that's my issue that I'd like you to hear.
Thank you, Mary Ellen.
All right, thank you. Please.
So as the evening goes on, you'll notice that more and more people will come up, right? Because you're doing a good job making people feel comfortable. I'm Ed Woods. I'm a Bennington resident, have been for close to 20 years. Interesting that we're talking about negativity, and we started the evening by talking about issues that brought you all together, addressing concerns that we had with policing, and that's all true. I want you to know that as a resident of Bennington for all those years and raising a family here, I feel that our issues in Bennington are not unique to Bennington, in that they're not worse than they are in other places. My work has taken me to many major cities across the country. And I will tell you that I'm glad to come home to a place like Bennington because I think that the quality of life in Bennington is better than it is in many places. It doesn't mean that we don't have tragedies and issues. We sure do. But I also want to mention, I think you guys did a great job setting the expectation for tonight. I knew exactly what you were hoping to get tonight, and I came here with that in mind. I think that maybe one of the things that your board can do to assist the police department is to assist in that area. I don't think we do a good enough job in the area of public education. I know that our police department certainly tries, and I know that there's plenty of outreach, but I don't know that it actually gets to the residents of Bennington so that people understand what the efforts are. We started the evening talking a little bit more about diversity and race than I thought we might. And for those of you that know me, you know that I have an adopted son who I worry lives in a community that doesn't have a lot of diversity. The flip side of that is that we live in Bennington. It's a small community where most people know who my son is. And so he lives in this protected sort of world. Our police department hosts a summer camp program for kids that my son has fit into all the years that he's been growing up. That has been a terrific way for him to learn to interact and engage with authority and with community policing. He's aged out of that program, and he's going on to bigger and better things with that great experience. I'm not sure that people understand or have access to that program or many other programs that our police department is behind. So the very strong point that I want to make is that community education and outreach is, I think, what could be lacking, not for lack of effort on the part of the police department. And when people mention that our police department is understaffed, that can't be understated. Last time I had a conversation with the chief, we were about a third understaffed. I understand that we're in better shape now maybe than we were, but a third of a force the size of ours is dangerously understaffed in my opinion. So that can't be understated. So recruiting, that sort of thing should be an effort. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We have pizza. Want to take a break?
Oh, it's here? Oh, so I've heard that the pizza is here, and it's right about 7. So let's take a break. And should we plan to sort of be back in this configuration in about 15 minutes? Great.
Just right out of the kitchen.
Yep, so just right out there in the kitchen, you'll find the pizza.
will start to take their seats, we're going to get started and finish up.
We are going to continue, and we're going to start up with Kelly Carroll reading another comment that has come in, and some of you, I approached you in person, so we really do want to hear from voices we haven't heard. Whatever you have to say tonight will be valuable, so please just think about this right there. It's easy. You don't have to say it aloud, but we would really love to hear more voices. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
Hi, thank you for staying with us. I hope everybody enjoyed the pizza. Thank you to Bennington Pizza House. That's where we ordered it from, and it was nice and yummy and hot, so I hope everyone enjoyed it. I do want to read two other comments that came into the website. And the first one is from somebody named Scott. And it says, while I am an old, 6-foot white guy, I have had nothing but positive experiences with Bennington Police. My 2 cents of the day, closing the river park, is the, quote, opposite of what we should be doing. So, Scott, thank you for your comment. And then I do have one other one that I'd like to read. This one's a little longer. And this is anonymous. This came in, and it is called Support the Police. I realize the intention of the board is a good one and that they have had the community in mind. I am concerned about the rising crime and what the unintentional blowback this board might cause and the negative consequences. Let me explain. As someone who others might consider BIPAC, I guess I have a lot of privilege these days to speak about anything and not have the fear of being canceled. In fact, because of my marginalized status and as an oppressed people, others will laud me for the comment on history I make, no matter how inane. Based on the current tide of popular thought, I should censor the police and support any structure of defunding, dismantling, or decrying the police state. However, the opposite could not be further from the case, and what I would like to do is praise the work of the Bennington Police Department. I have seen that they are courageous and tireless workers who work very hard to keep this town safe and fight the scourge of drugs and crime which have shaken our town. Let me repeat, I empathetically support our police force. And after reading the banner for just the past 2 days alone, where violent kidnappers who traffic in fentanyl are back on the streets, and repeat offenders are giving slaps on the wrist, I know the real victims here are us. The citizens of Bennington and its environs that suffer daily watching our town occupied by malevolent forces. If anything, we need a citizens board to deal with crime and to reclaim our streets. It is horrible to see how the streets of Bennington have become a William Burroughs wasteland with zombie-like junkies panhandling tourists and kids, where emancipated figures stagger in public in the throes of their hallucinatory demons, where our main street sports a pot shop and a head shop that resembles a candy store arcade, and all the old corner bodegas flout glass pipes, bongs, and vape. In fact, I stopped taking my children downtown years ago and have had to call the police on fights occurring in a residence known for drugs right next to a church and a restaurant. Such picturesque imagery for travelers to our town, to future investors, and to current residents. It is horrible to read how one violent offender after another, who one dealer after another, infects Bennington with shootings, drugs, and chaos. Businesses have left Main Street because of this. I know as I have talked to some folks who have fled to other towns. Families and schools are imploding because of this, and people are moving out because of this. Yet what some people seem more concerned about is to make sure we are clamping down on the police. It seems some people want to jump to the defund police bandwagon. Rather than that, we should be concerned about how this town is becoming an urban nightmare. Rather than that, we should give more facilities and tools for the police to defend us from the invasion of fentanyl and gangs and urban decrepitude. This issue is no joke. It is very serious. It is affecting lives, professions, people, the town, our tax base, our image, and our soul. I know, for I see it firsthand. I see the children who have lost parents to overdose. I work with kids who live in neighborhoods damaged by dealers, by addicts, and systematic poverty. I have seen the streets where middle-class families lived and raised generations decay, replaced by boarded-up crack dens and transient phantoms. As for the police, I have interacted for years with individuals from the police department. They have pulled me over for various infractions multiple times, and they have treated me, and they never treated me disrespectfully. They never profiled me, ever, even though I definitely look like I do not come from around here. They were polite, professional, and even at times showed me clemency. Every time, of course, I also accorded them with the respect they deserve, and I have been here for decades. Finally, when I have had to deal with sensitive cases at my work, the police always showed great consideration for the cases. They were attentive and sought to help rather than hinder. I never once witnessed anyone show bias or use foul language or excessive force. They even helped a friend deal with a hate crime situation and were extremely conscientious. I imagine that there might be some bad moments, but I never witnessed this. Now, more than ever, what we need is for people to unite against crime, stop the hurt that permeates through schools, through streets, through the very fabric of this town. We must all cease to be afraid, to be impotent, and to attack the wrong straw man. Let us instead concentrate our force against the blight of crime. Let us help Putnam Block become amazing. Let us save our parks so children can walk along the river. Let us relieve the strain on our EMTs. I have concerns then that this community group will have a negative impact on our town despite its good intentions. If you do even a cursory search online, almost every city or community that, quote, attacked its police force experienced a stunning increase in crime, especially violent crimes. The stores moved out of the center, the shootings increased, and the people suffered. I hope then, if this board must exist, that they have at least 2 or 3 people who are supporters of the police and monitor criminals rather than law enforcement personnel. I grew up in New York City in the 70s and 80s. Those movies that show the gritty streets and alleys of chaos were real. The last thing I want is for Bennington to become Fort Apache, the Bronx. However, it is heading there for sure. And this was sent on our website input form anonymously this afternoon. So I just wanted to share that. Brian?
All right, so we've heard in detail one perspective, and I really welcome, and again, I came and spoke to some of you in person, so, well, let me, because again, I know some, but I see someone back here who has not spoken, so please, we'd love to hear from you.
I'm Sheila Molyneux. I'm from North Bennington. I came here tonight because I came from the People's Park. I came to acknowledge that those people have been dispersed, and who knows where. Was there any concern about what would become of them when they left there? We left images of our concern. A bunch of us were there, and we left some posters and lights, sort of it felt like a memorial to, sad that those people had lost their homes. So the issue is not just people being in the park. The issue is, why were they homeless in the first place? What is this town doing? I understand it's a bigger problem, but what is this town doing to make sure that people have housing? It's only going to get worse as more people are out of the motels. The letter you just read was saying that there are all these other problems, all these problems that are not exactly policing problems, and yet we've tasked the police with taking care of them. What we need is a much broader approach that involves there are many agencies around who are also involved, and if there were better coordination and planning, we might be able to make some inroads. If you task the police with things that that are not theirs, or not entirely theirs, then there will be flack. So I'm encouraging there to be broader look at the problems, not just as the police's problems or the Department of Welfare problems, but as the community's problems, and to work on them in that fashion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I've told Sam, I think your name is Sam, about 5 times, not yet, but...
Well, I mean, this is something I want nobody else is speaking, but I gave you the opportunity.
And then again, others, please think about coming forward, even if it's to share something that feels small. So, and in light of what we've heard recently, if there's anyone who works with an agency or part of an agency or on a board who is working with vulnerable communities and has some experience to share, I would really encourage you to speak as well. But having said that, please.
I had my moment tonight about 15, 20 minutes ago, right here in this room with this public. While we were having conversation, eating pizza, the voices, it finally happened in this room. We are communicating. I'm ecstatic. It finally happened, and I can't contain my thoughts, I'm sorry. Conversations, people introducing, people welcoming people that are new to Bennington, 4 years, 5 years, just recently moved. We need to constantly do this, on the quote of Mr. Pips. Conversation. We can't wait for somebody to come to you. You got to go to them. And if you want to address the issues of Bennington, it started with Michael Harrington and the Catalyst. Before that gentleman left, I hoped that he was going to go into other neighborhoods. It never happened. Well, I'm picking up the ball, and we are going into the other neighborhoods. We are going to set up a table on Grove Street. We're going to set up a table on Beach Street. We're going to start learning the hoods, the neighborhoods. Every neighborhood is different. I was raised on the flats. I never experienced Main Street. Now where do I live? On the east end of town. I don't experience Northside Drive anymore. I experience Main Street. More people experience Main Street more than I do. Nobody is giving a book and saying, go to the library and here, read this. This is what you got to all learn about Bennington. Yes, we have the Shires of Bennington, but doesn't tell the case history of, there's always a learning curve. For the residents that have been here for lifelong residents, we're constantly learning. We may think that we know everything, but we're constantly learning. For the ones that are new here, that are 4 years or 6 years, it's very difficult to read the manual. And there's always been a discussion, well, you're not a true Vermonter because you've spent 4 years here or 10 years here, or you're not a true Vermonter, you go to Shasbury or whatever. Regardless, you turn to come part of this community, no matter how many years they have spent here in our community, we need to embrace them, we need to include them, we need to have the conversation, and that conversation happened tonight. And I know I sound like a broken record, educate Bennington. You got educated tonight, Bennington, and I hope you read the banner, and I hope you watch the select board members, and I hope you speak with Chief Doucette and leave messages along with Camillo Grandi. Communication, communication, communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay, you have to not just let the same people speak.
I will do
Well, I'm looking at the clock. It's about almost 7:45. Perhaps what might make sense, if this makes sense to the members of CPARB, since I'm not a member at all, is to maybe share some of what you've been doing and your experience very briefly. I mean, people talk about who they were personally, but maybe Kelly and maybe others could chime in just to kind of address people who were wondering, what has the CPARB been doing? I guess, well, because you've already kind of spoken twice, Jonathan, I think.
I just want to say one thing that I think is actually very important about this effort.
Go ahead, John.
One thing that's actually extremely important about this effort, and I see that.
Wait, actually, could you go to the mic, because since it is on TV?
So, again, it's me. You all know me. I'm infamous or famous, whichever you pick. I want to say one thing about this effort that I think needs to be said. I'm a big fan of communication, and I think we all need to understand and recognize communication versus rhetoric. I'm a big advocate of actual defund the police, believe it or not, but I feel like a lot of individuals, when they hear those words, they get really scared and shivering. Now, I think the nomenclature, the people who came up with that idea it was wrong. When people say defund the police, I think it should have been said realign, or recenter, refocus. We heard today about a police department that has a manpower crisis, and I can empathize with that. I mean, I worked in education for the majority of my life. Before that, it was youth placement, which is, some would argue, covalent with law enforcement, but not really. Those are two areas that always have a manpower shortage. Asking anybody to do their job properly and effectively within a manpower shortage, it's hard. So why do I go back to the defund the police part about that? I think when you're faced with a manpower shortage, you can do one of two things. You could hire more and expect them to do the same thing without looking at the actual thing that got you to be in a manpower shortage to begin with. Or, and this is a wild idea, they do it in other countries such as Australia, Denmark, a number of places that are really successful with this. You can look at that manpower shortage and say, maybe we need to realign exactly what this force or what this system is being used for. Make it more proactive on a fewer things so they don't have to be in domestic violence calls or mental health crises. When people say defund the police, they're really talking about trying to get either A, the police officers to be more focused on what they would be best at, and using that same savings to actually go towards community apparatuses and community resources that would actually fill in the gap. I'll give you an example. There's no reason why Chief Doucette should be responding to a call about somebody who's going through a mental health crisis on the 3rd floor of the building. That is a waste of his time, no offense. That is a waste of his resources. That is a waste of his expertise. And Mr. Doucette, not trying to shame you or anything, but I'm 90% sure Mr. Doucette does not have a clinical degree in psychology or, addiction medical or addiction treatment. Do you?
I've had lots of mental health training, but I don't have a degree.
There you go.
In that field.
Perfect. Wouldn't it make more sense to have a qualified individual to go to that situation rather than Mr. Doucette? Mr. Doucette's not a dumb man. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying, in fact, I think he's the exact inverse. But I think like him going into a situation where he's not adequately prepared for is a waste of his resource and time. So, those individuals who believe in expanding a police budget unlimitedly will somehow lead to less crime or less resources. I got a city for you, Baltimore City. I got another one, Newark. I got another one. This never has worked. What ends up happening is a police force gets an unlimited budget. They do things as systems, as business as usual. They end up making more work for themselves, and it just doesn't work. It's a circular argument. However, what has seemed to work in places like I spent 4.5 years living in Canberra and Melbourne. Melbourne's, I guess you could say, the rough part of Australia, you could argue. I don't think there is a rough part, but whatever. You use those resources to basically have qualified individuals take the load off of a probably workforce-trained force so that they can do their actual job more effectively. So I want to circle back. When you engage these sort of communications, we should not be listening to what we hear the media saying with catchy catchy buzz phrases like defund the police or anything. We should instead try to actually engage with what the idea is. Because when we engage in that buzzword conversation, naturally, as human beings, as Americans, as whatever you want to call it, we automatically make up our mind within the first 5 seconds of a conversation if we just hear a buzzword. Guaranteed. Death tax. Worked in the past, or as opposed to a state tax. Or there's a number of other examples I could pull out of a hat. If you, as a board, want to be successful, you have to avoid engaging in rhetoric. You have to. You have to, it has to be a communication centered around people's experiences. It has to be a communication centered around what we can understand from each other. That empathy and understanding I mentioned earlier, it has to be at the forefront. Because if we just basically listen to the scary nature of defund the police, or whatever it may be, again, you're going to have this exact same conversation in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, however long it's going to take for you guys to get the hint. But that's one of the things I feel like we need to actually mention. When you have these conversations, always remember communication versus rhetoric. That's it.
Anyone else who'd like to speak before I ask the board to share a little bit and talk about next steps? Well, I will just say, this isn't your last chance. This is not the only time there will ever be an opportunity. And this is really an experiment. I should say that as we discussed planning this session, it was one of the key things was that the board needed to kind of introduce itself and give the community an opportunity to know who's on the board and to share with the board, but also for the board to start a process that will continue on for years of listening and engagement. So this is just opening the door. This isn't a one-off opportunity. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, and then maybe other members of the board may say a bit too.
So over the last year, we've really done a lot of training and trying to get established and figure out how to work together as a board, how to comply with the open meeting law, which is a big challenge. Not going to lie on that. And so it took us a while to get going. We have, the town and BPD recently put in a new policy that will allow us to get some of the details between complaints and compliments, so we can start looking at that. We'll have some more traffic data that's going to be coming out in August, and we'll be able to look at that. The next things that we're going to be concentrating on after taking some of the information that we got today, trying to do an action plan to plan out our next year and where we're going to go for some of our other community forums and the topics. We meet here every third Thursday at 6 o'clock. And it's also, thank you, Cat TV. It's recorded on Cat TV, so if you aren't able to join us, you are able to see the recordings. And really what we've tried to do, so, just starting off, is trying to get in, working in relationships with the agencies and Bennington Police Department. So usually at the beginning of every month before our agenda has to be publicized, Will, who is the assistant chair, and I will sit down and meet with Chief Doucette and Lieutenant Grandy about some, maybe like current events or some things that are going on that we want to have them possibly talk about in that portion of the meeting. So, for example, a couple of months ago, there was a lot of publicity about some incidents that happened with VSP and some off-duty officers. So we were able to get the chief to come in and to talk about Bennington PD's code of conduct, what's included, off-duties also included, and like Jonathan said, just trying to get that education and that communication and understanding going in. For our meeting this month, we didn't have a quorum, but we did have Lorna Matern from UCS, and she came and she spoke about the collaboration that's happening between UCS and, Bennington Police Department. Next month, it's Community for Restorative Justice. I'm not sure, August, September, I think is going to be the Bennington Coalition for the Homeless. So we're bringing in people from the agencies just to try to get that communication and that education and relationship going to help build the trust. There's also a lot going on locally, which I'm not going to get into because I don't feel it's our place to do it, but there is something called Project Alliance, and Lorna Matern spoke about that briefly, and I'm sure you're going to be hearing a lot more about that, and that's where the agencies are getting together and collaborating with law enforcement, trying to get more outreach and communication and making us a stronger community. We're going to be concentrating on some survey questions coming up. The town survey is going to be going out in the fall, and we encourage everybody to fill that out. And let's see, we've been going to some other events. We've gone to Mayfest. We've gone to some forums that the Justice Department had a community forum. There was I think the NAACP had a forum over at the high school several months ago. And we try to get out and do some of that one-on-one and having those conversations with the community. When I said that the open meeting law can be frustrating, it is, because sometimes we go out and we have those conversations and it's, how can you bring it back without violating that? So that's why we're trying to get some of the agencies in. That's why we encourage people to come to our meetings. We have a public comment at every meeting, and if there's something you want to say, we want to listen. We want to hear from you. We also allow comments on our agenda items when we go through the meetings, and we have our comment page on our website. So we do encourage you to reach out, and if you see one of us, stop us and talk with us, because we are out and about. We are maybe not out with like flashing lights saying, hey, here I am, but we do try to get out and interact and try to hear what's going on, and we want to hear from the community. We want to hear your experiences, and we want to hear your input. So, over the next few months, we're going to be taking this information and seeing where it leads us until our next forum, which we're talking tentatively about in the fall, collaborative community policing. So that's mine. Anyone else want to add?
Could you repeat when you meet?
We meet on the third Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. in this room. Our meetings are not live on CAT TV, but they do film them, and they are on their YouTube site. And in full disclosure, we do not normally have pizza. But if it brings people in, I'm not saying, you know.
Okay, it looks like Marsh wants to add something.
Yeah, Marsh.
So I just have a couple of things I say. First is thanks to each of you who made this effort to be here, to come with an open heart, to share yourself vulnerably and openly with us all. I think we've all learned a lot, and I feel like really community is happening here tonight, and this is so, so important. Second thing, I've heard a number of people ask, how can I help? I think there are two ways that stand out in my mind immediately. One of them is you can come to our meetings when we meet. We're learning a lot about what's happening in our police department, in our community, the problems before us, and the steps forward. At the last meeting, for which we did not have a quorum of members because of the problems, but at the last forum, Laura Matern came from United Counseling Service, and she said two sentences that I hope you'll hear and be encouraged as I was. One of them is, United Counseling Service, we cannot do our work without the partnership of the Bennington Police Department. And Bennington Police Department cannot do their work without our partnership. The needs, the problems we face, we must be with each other. And that made me really excited. Collaboration isn't just something that you put on a piece of paper and say, oh, isn't that nice? The police and the mental health department work with each other. They really are teammates, and I think that's really exciting. And the third thing is I hope that when you come and you listen, or if you can't get to the meeting, you watch it on YouTube, that you then talk with your friends about what you've heard, what you learned, because there's a lot of powerful stuff happening that most people aren't hearing about. And if you would hear it and share it, it would help our whole town. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marsh. So as we close in on 8 p.m., I just want to leave you with a couple of things. Other people have said it in slightly different ways, but I think two really important things that you can do. One is to help CPARB know what your experience is in whatever way works for you, but also who else they should be talking to. Who else should CPARB reach out to? But then also, you're all part of families, networks, communities. Talk to people that you know and encourage them to reach out to and connect with CPARB, to go to the website and make comments to, as people said, find people on the street and just connect and give information. Two last thoughts. One is, one thing I've heard a lot tonight, and it's not different from really most other places, is this sort of almost like a difference between law enforcement and community safety. And I think rather than thinking of those as opposites, I would ask you to consider thinking of policing services as having a law enforcement responsibility, but they also are partners in creating community safety. And Bennington has to define and continue to refine how you think about that balance and what the role of the police department is in creating community safety. But I think it is not just law enforcement in any community. And then the very last thing is that, not because I'm so amazing, but I've done work like this with communities all across the United States and even a bit in Mexico. And I can't think of another community that's your size that has invested energy in looking at a serious community policing advisory function. The amount of time and care and thoughtfulness that this town has put into this work is incredibly impressive. I mean, I know you all live here. I think you probably all love Bennington in many ways and think it's really special. And you're probably, oh, it's Bennington. You don't know how amazing it is that your town is engaged in this work. So I've just been deeply privileged to be part of it over these last 2 years. We'll continue to be of service if it's helpful, and just know that it's been a really meaningful experience for me to be part of this journey with your town.
And I just want to add, if you did see the press release that Jonas Spivak did for us, he did talk about in there that there's only about 200 communities in the country that have a board such as us. So I think that that's a really good thing. That's something to be proud of. And Jonathan, I'm going to throw you under the bus. So Jonathan and I had a meeting a couple of months ago when we were talking about a possible accountability summit forum type thing. And one thing that struck me was when we were talking about trying to get, a better relationship with BPD, he had said that the chief was always willing to come to the table and talk. And I have to say, when we go, and I know that sometimes I just pester him, and he's got to be like, oh my God, because that number, it's just back again. But I think that the fact that they're willing to come and talk with us, and they meet with us, every month, they make the time to come to the meetings. I think that says a lot from that perspective as far as being willing and open. And I'm very grateful that people from the community came in tonight to actually do that as well, because I think that shows an openness on the community. And I do want to thank, there's been a lot of traumatic, and I know that if you come to our meetings, you hear me say this all the time, there's been a lot of trauma in our community lately. And I think that, mental health has to be up to the forefront of what we do for multiple disciplines. Healthy officers make healthy decisions, and that makes us a healthier community. So I also agree with a lot of what people said today about getting more resources, mental health-wise, into the community. And I encourage everybody to advocate and support for that. And again, thank you all for coming. And our next meeting will be July 20th at 6 p.m. in this room. CRJ, the Center for Restorative Justice, is our expected guest agency. And our expected policy that BPD will be talking about will be the soft restraints and the impact that new particular law has had on policing. So I will stop rambling.
So I was about to say, I think we'll close, but I see someone who would like to speak, so you may have the very last word, I think.
A little belated, but my name is Barbara Bluto, and I came here tonight to hear what you had to offer us as to what we could do to also help you. And I learned a lot tonight, and I plan to continue learning more. And I want to thank you all for all the hours and hours and hours that you put in on this board on behalf of our community. Thank you.
Thank you for entrusting us with this. So, thank you.
And I can't think of a better note to end this meeting on. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for the work that you do, and look forward to what comes next in this work. Have a good night.